perhaps changing and gaining compliance for that closure. For those of you that don't know where the Bird to Gird path is, there's a town of Girdwood there, there's a town of Bird, and the red line there is the old highway alignment, and that just happens to be the paved bike path. And you can also see the yellow line there, that's the current highway alignment, and there's black polygons there, and those represent avalanche paths. And what's interesting, there's quite a bit of history here. The first avalanche research station in the 50s was right around here, Devil's Club. And there's been 2 fatalities. That first year that the highway opened, there was a fatality right here due to an avalanche, a secondary avalanche, and another highway fatality has been right here. And between those early years and now, there's been quite a few avalanche incidents with vehicles and people traveling around. So the problem is we've been having people downrange when we're trying to do avalanche mitigation. And we've had to stop performing public safety, reducing the avalanche hazard because people have been downrange. We use military artillery. We do other kinds of avalanche reduction work. We have a daisy bell, uses hydrogen and oxygen. We do some sort of, occasionally we have done explosive delivery by helicopter or heli-bombing. And there's quite a bit of public use. And certainly when the path is clear, it's really an invitation for folks to get on there and to use it. And we're trying to manage it so that we have a closure so people are not downrange when we're shooting. Let's see, different avalanche potentials. With the new highway alignment, you can see that the path has changed from the old highway to the new highway, and it can average between couple hundred feet to around 1,000 feet difference. That changes the avalanche potential danger in the path fairly significantly. And at one point, the highway department was forecasting for that old alignment, and now we're forecasting for the new alignment. So in 2000, when the highway was realigned from there to its current alignment, we decided the best course of action, along with Chugach State Park, was to have a permanent winter closure, just to keep people out of there for both avalanche danger and avalanche reduction. Now here's what we've done in the past. Here are some avalanche signs on the side of the path. And if you can read that second part there, it says, between Girdwood and Bird is one of the most hazardous avalanche-prone corridors anywhere. And that was written by a prominent avalanche engineer, Art Mears, and that could have been the case for that alignment at that time. There's another sign there. And within the last 5 years, we went to this barricade-style closure to try and really get the point across that, yeah, folks, we need you to pay attention to the sign, stop right there, read it, and you're not supposed to go past it. Now, what's the reality? Well, people are putting the blog post up, taking pictures and saying, yeah, bike path is clear, weather's clear, it's fine, we're going to go ahead and go anyway. And if there's anyone in the audience, I didn't ask for your permission to post these, so sorry about that. So what is the actual usage? And we know because our office is right there, right next to the Girdwood side of the trailhead, we know that it's used daily. But last winter, we got a traffic counter from DOT highway data, and I spent a couple of days looking at a video camera, fast forwarding, stopping, counting how many people are actually going through there. And for this week, we found that 100 people are going through. These are unique visits, and about 89 dogs. It is Girdwood, so there's tons of dogs everywhere. Well, I did see a couple of dogs taking a walk for sure, without a person. If anyone knows an effective way to let those dogs know that they're entering an avalanche area, please let me know. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a step back. Instead of having a full winter closure, we are only going to close the bike path during times of avalanche mitigation. And hopefully, we're going to gain some compliance by having such a short closure, 5 days a year on average, compared to an entire winter's worth. Now the problem is, since we're only closing it for avalanche mitigation instead of avalanche danger, in conjunction with Chugach State Park and Alaska State Parks, they're going to put up their typical avalanche hazard area warning signs. I'm sure people have seen these throughout the Front Range. So it'll be managed the same way that Chugach State Park manages their other trailheads or trails with avalanche hazard areas. And so hopefully that'll make it easier on them to possibly enforce that closure. So we're going to we already have put out 6 different signs. And these signs are typically at the start of the trail access points. And there's one mid-highway, there's an access there. And we have 2 on this side. This is the, from what we've seen, the highest usage area, closer to the town of Girdwood. And there's also another trail connecting onto this paved bike path. So it's more to maintain for us. We have to physically go out there. And as you saw in that picture there, we're going to physically go out there and press buttons on these lights whenever we want to go shoot. So it's a little bit more work for us instead of leaving a sign out there. Now, instead of completely closing the path, it's going to be up to anyone on that trail system to enter that area at their own risk. Probably not an issue because they were going around the closure signs anyway, but we're putting the decision on the user, much like the rest of the trails in Chugach State Park. And again, we're hoping for greater compliance. Shorter closure, 5 days a year instead of the entire winter. Maybe folks will pay attention more. It'll be highly visible with flashing strobe lights, and we'll be able to make it a lot more enforceable. In the last couple of winters, we would really have to have someone posted at the trailhead, a law enforcement officer, and give tickets all day long. That might help with the revenue stream with the state, but those LEO officers most likely would not want to be sitting there. And I was really curious if anyone else in the lower 48 had this sort of problem. In Colorado, Summit County, they've got a 10-mile long paved bike path, similar to ours, between the town of Frisco and Copper Mountain. And in conversations with Colorado Avalanche Information Center, these paths are infrequent, but as you can see in the picture on the right, in 2011, a wet slide came down, buried the bike path, 30 feet deep, broke 30-foot old trees. So they're infrequent paths, and they do infrequent mitigation. What they've done is an agreement with the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. They've, after the end of their winter closure, they've come up with an agreement with the county here to have weekly on-site forecasts for the maintenance personnel clearing this path. So once again, it's a full winter closure for those folks. Now let's look at kind of the other side of the spectrum. This is Little Cottonwood Canyon for Matt here. He knows all about it. What these guys are doing, they're closing the entire ridge line. They're closing the entire backcountry, and they're potentially closing the entire road, the canyon. So that's the one extreme we don't want to get close to for our highway and our avalanche paths that we mitigate. And we based our signage off this sign to attempt to stay in industry standards, if it is an industry standard. I'm sure Matt could talk about this more, but from what I understand, that these polygons, these areas that they're closing the entire backcountry is based off of the 1,000 meter standoff distance for 105 artillery. What that means is if a round goes off next to you, you'll be relatively safe if you're 1,000 meters away from it. So perhaps that's how these are built in. Disclosure map is made, and along with where they mitigate avalanche hazard. So that's kind of the part one of this talk. Part two here is musings from the road, kind of thoughts I've had over my short time being with Alaska DOT. Now I've started because I'm part of the highway program now, I've really started to notice these other issues that other highways are starting to see. And specifically this case on the upper right is not necessarily a highway, but a residential area. I don't know if everyone's aware, this is the Mount Jumbo, Missoula, Montana avalanche. In 2014, one snowboarder triggered and triggered a slide. I was able to self-arrest. That slide started, you just can't quite see it over the roll there, but it started there, went over that roll, came into this residential area. Caught two children. One was partially buried, one was fully buried. They were able to recover them and moved a house, buried two residences that were in it, and one later died from their injuries in the hospital. Now this image on the upper left, December 2016, that is Teton Pass, Wyoming, and this was a skier-triggered event onto an open road. Put 20 feet of debris on the road, about 300 feet wide. Caught one vehicle. The driver was able to swim out of it as it came to rest and get out of the snow uninjured. This image in the center at the lower end there was an incident in Colorado, February 2016. Group of 5 skiers descended down a slide path that affects the road. 11:30, triggered a slide, caught 2 of them, and buried the road 12 to 15 feet deep by 30 feet wide. Now I was curious, is there any sort of education that we are doing as avalanche educators, professionals, to talk to the general public about this, or students? Now Bruce Tremper has 10 Commandments of Low Risk Travel. Who knows number 5? Nellis? Thou shalt be obsessed with consequences. I was just seeing if you were awake over there. So thou shalt be obsessed with consequences. That's what's the slope on you, what's it going to do, what's above you, what's below you. Specifically, what I want to emphasize is what's below you. Is there an open transportation corridor below you? Is there infrastructure? And again, out of Utah, Drew Hardesty and the Utah Avalanche Center came up with this great public safety announcement, this video here. And he's been pushing for the last 4 or 5 years, backcountry responsibility, knowledge, awareness, and wisdom. And I have a short clip here to show you.
We're at crossroads in the state of the backcountry right now. Backcountry use has exploded. Side country use has exploded. We're seeing increased numbers of close calls and accidents in the backcountry between parties in the road, between parties in infrastructure. This is unsustainable. I know we go into the backcountry because our love of the powder and the freedom of the mountains, but it's got to be tempered with responsibility to make the right decisions at the right time. Remember, our decisions we make define us as an individual and reflect back on the community as a whole.
Backcountry is my life. There's so many reasons and so much scope to be had. Beauty, powder, friendship, it's all there. We have to travel with mindfulness in the mountains. The 3 key points are knowledge, awareness, and wisdom.
I'm Angel Collinson, and the first one is knowledge. Do you know what the AVI conditions are? If you don't, you can always find out at avalanche.org. Also, can you pull off your own rescue? This is key.
Hey, I'm Brody Levin, and the second one is awareness. Are you aware of road or ski area avalanche control plans and closures? Are you aware of parties above or below you?
We have tons of avalanche paths throughout the West that threaten roads. There's thousands of cars and buses on them. In some places, buildings below. Really can't have people riding in terrain that we have targeted for explosives and artillery work. An accident here has consequences that affect every avalanche safety program in North America. So please remember, we're all in this together.
The third precept is wisdom. Are you putting others at risk without their consent? This includes roads, infrastructure, and other parties below.
A few incidents and accidents that quickly unravel into access and liability issues. Let's work together. Let's travel with mindfulness in the mountains to avoid potential consequences of permanent closures, backcountry permit systems, and personal liability.
So whether you're out in the big mountains, deep in the backcountry, or getting the goods just out of bounds, it's super important to remember the three key factors: knowledge, awareness, and wisdom, that are going to preserve what we love, which is our freedom in the backcountry. Because, at the end of the day, what we want most is just riding off into the sunset and high-fiving our buddies.
Well, that's great. That's Utah. They've got 2 million people next to Salt Lake City moving into that canyon, and there's a limited backcountry. So I was curious, what's going on in Alaska? Is this a problem here? So I was able to find this. This is in down on the Kenai Peninsula. This is Summit Lake. This is one of our avalanche areas on the Seward Highway that we mitigate. And what's going on in this picture, you can see crater there from 105 howitzer round, and center punching both of these avalanche paths right next to these bomb craters. You can see a little bit better there, snow water going by. How many people think that is a bad idea? So since everyone pretty much didn't raise their hands, you all think it's a good idea, which is fine, maybe it is. If you're going to center punch an avalanche path, you might as well go buy a tested bomb hole. Well, here's one reason why it might not be a good idea. So what's going on here is you can see one round going off. You can see another round, a crater. And you can see a line here, and that is the start of the slab. That's the flank, and stock wall comes out here. So it's not uncommon to have a bullet hole be removed from the same slab by another bullet or an air blast. So just because there's one bullet hole round that didn't go off, or that did go off and didn't trigger a slide, doesn't mean it's totally safe. And there's a great avalanche video. You can see how wet it is. I found this, an old TAR article. I think this was 2007, but this front image is Avalanche on Hatcher Pass. This is a skier-triggered slide on the last path on Marmot around milepost 16. The skier triggered a slide, buried the road, stranded folks up at the lodge, and DOT got in there the next day and cleared the road up. Small shout out for Alaska Mountain Safety Center, which is now the Alaska Avalanche School. There's a group right there, Doug and Jill, checking out that crown and that avalanche. So how's it going in Alaska? Is skier-triggered slides onto open transportation corridors an issue? Well, I mean, I'd say it's an issue, maybe. I was only able to find one incident of this happening, but I'd be really curious, this is Alaska audience, have you guys heard of anything else happening? Party-triggered slide onto open corridor or infrastructure. It can certainly happen in Alaska. And perhaps one thing we can all agree on as Hilliard.
Tim, as a side note to Alyeska Resort, we definitely have a similar situation with the backcountry skiing going on in and around Girdwood and specifically right on the border of Alyeska. The southwest face of Max's Mountain has been used traditionally for decades and decades. The first thing users of that should take a look at is if you look at the shape of the terrain, there's really no truly safe ridgetop access up there. You have to do a large assessment to use it. And you should also know that we do not control that slope in any way. It's blind to our artillery. It's around the corner. Can't hit it. It's on a wild slope. There have been recent close calls. There was a spear trigger slide up there last winter that we observed. I had to investigate to some degree. You can also know that the avalanches created on the southwest face can spill over into the ski area and endanger the people in the ski area. So that's another consideration related to these highway closures.
Sure, yeah. Party triggered, affecting folks that, quite frankly, expect to be in a mitigated avalanche ski area. And natural snowpack is outside of that area and can impact those folks. Now, I'd like to at least come to a consensus with everyone here. Can we all promote social backcountry responsibility in that, at least for my focus, is it's not okay to trigger slides onto open corridors? Maybe we shouldn't promote that kind of thing. Maybe we won't post or publish pictures of us skiing high hazard paths that affect roads or railroads. Maybe, yeah. Avalanche educators, ski guides, I think we can pull that off. But quite frankly, it's not really a problem in Alaska yet. I'd like to sum up part one again. So everyone that raised their hands that go past the closure, it's now open for you, except when we're mitigating avalanche hazard. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead first, Adam.
You're going to be sweeping the path clean before?
Yeah, so I should mention that a little bit. It's such a big deal having folks downrange. We got to have, whenever we're performing any sort of mitigation, we'll do a thorough sweep of the bike path visually and inspect each trailhead. And we also have a drone in case we need it to check those paths, and we have done that before. Make sure no one's in that area.
Does that mean that somebody's going to start grooming the Gird trail?
Man, that'd be sweet, wouldn't it? I'll let you bring that up to Chugach State Park, as long as they don't go there when it's closed. Paul?
I got a question for you. So, in situations where you have in and out visibility on your patrol mission, do you anticipate that the extra time of activating the signs and et cetera may conclude a successful mission on occasion?
Let me rephrase that or repeat your question.
Yeah.
You said that could we increase the closure, starting the closure with the flashing lights before the mitigation, like the night before, or what are you getting
No,
at?
I'm asking you if the additional time that you might have to take with your new regime, given you might lose your visibility in that extra 5 minutes, and not be able to complete your mission, if you're not doing the final mission.
Sure. Well, quite frankly, if we're going to do any sort of highway mitigation and we're worried about weather, we'll be using our howitzers and with blind fire capabilities. Yep. And we haven't timed how long it takes to turn on each light, but we're trying our best to get remotes to turn them on and off. Make it a little bit easier so we can stay in our trucks and not use our feet. That's what we do. Any other questions?
I think So, there's a lot of paths that are skied nationwide that threaten, corridors. And so to come up with a policy that says, okay, we're not going to ski those paths that threaten corridors, I think is going to be pretty difficult. And so, maybe a skier's responsibility or coder responsibility would be to, know the forecast, know when to control, and then don't enter those spots when those things are going to happen. I think major, so there's the safety issue, but then there's also, if I think probably folks in this room remember that avalanche that was triggered up out of Three Bowls in Highland, that it caught some folks, some friends of ours. But anyway, in the subsequent accident and investigation, one of the folks that was looking at the crown face skied out onto some hang fire, set off another avalanche that hit the back of a house up there in Highland. And that really animated the homeowners. They thought that was pretty exciting. And then backcountry skiers were responsible for avalanches in the park. And then the drawbridge got lifted, the gates came down, and then access within the South Fork was a big deal for at least that winter and on into the next one. So I think that's what the real threat is that the transportation corridors are not going to lose out. They're going to keep the corridor open. We're pretty small on the radar screen of interstate commerce and all that kind of stuff. And so it's incumbent upon us to come up with some kind of a protocol to avoid these situations, so we don't lose our what we want to be doing. So I think that rather than saying don't ski above the highways, okay, you better be careful when you do. You better think it out.
Exactly, and I think that's kind of where Bruce Trimper's 10 Commandments come in. Be obsessed with the consequences. And absolutely, it's in Alaska, at least the paths along the Gird, those are not high quality ski paths. Those are kind of terrible. Maybe where we're not mitigating specifically, but yeah, no one's there. But certainly with the images where those folks were skiing right next to the crater holes, that's, I would say beyond Hatcher Pass, that's probably another location that we'd run into that issue where skier triggered slides onto an open road. But yeah, the infrastructure, homes, that'll happen Eagle River and Crow Creek Road, and there's a couple spots in Alaska that's an issue.
Yeah, just not to be picky, but the avalanche that came down and hit the house the day after the avalanche started Three Bowls, it wasn't an avalanche investigation or data collection. It was the people trying to recover the 2 dogs that were expired. I was there, and I left because the people that were there, it was a wonderful day, number one, which is always bad because beautiful day, people don't want to stop, they don't want to come back. But anyway, me and some other people with more avalanche savvy than I, and I've done about 40 years of it, tried to encourage people, tried to get, we just left. And as we were leaving, got out to the main road, that's when the release came and piled up against the back of the house. But the Three Bowl side is one of the bigger ones, because it's come across the main road. It hit houses on the other side of the road historically, not in quite a while, but it has. And this one here, and that house was like the highest one on South Fork, just about, certainly in that stretch. The other path that scares me is the one you showed the photo of. Every time when I go to Hatcher, I hold my breath when I go by there. If I'm going a little late in the morning and there's already people there, and I say, hopefully today's not the day, because I've been there several times when that path has come across the road. And that's another one where, we're just living on borrowed time.
Great, thank you. All right.